This guy.
Okay, that'll work. You see here an image of Braxton Bragg commanding the Confederate Army of Tennessee. Just a few days before this battle, September 16th, 1863, he puts out an address to the Confederate troops. The troops will be held for an immediate move against the enemy. His demonstration on our flank has been thwarted, and twice he has retired before us when offered battle. We must now force him to the issue. Soldiers, you are largely reinforced. You must now seek the contest. In doing so, I know you will be content to suffer privations and encounter hardships. Heretofore, you have never failed to respond to your general when he has asked sacrifice at your hands. Relying on your gallantry and patriotism, he asks you to add the crowning glory to the wreath you wear. Our cause is in your keeping. Your enemy boasts that you are demoralized and retreating before him. Having accomplished your object in driving back his flank movement, let us now turn on his main force and crush it in its fancied security. Your generals will lead you. You have but to respond to assure us a glorious victory over an insolent foe. I know what your response will be. Trusting in God and the justice of our cause, and nerved by the love of the dear ones at home, failure is impossible and victory must be ours. So, in that, what could not inspire you to want to fight in this battle and gain a victory for your cause? Well, with the soldiers, that wasn't the problem. But the commanders, and he says your generals will lead you, that becomes a different problem, and that kind of comes to a head here on the morning of September the 20th. Listen to what you are hearing right now. And we are getting close to day dawn. Braxton Bragg is expecting to hear noise of a battle having resumed, but he is not hearing that. He is basically hearing what you are hearing right now. His orders the evening before were for the Confederates to resume the attack at day dawn on Sunday morning, September the 20th. Day dawn occurring about 5:30 to 5:45 in the morning, which, according to the time that we are running today, daylight savings time, we're running about an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half ahead of what time would have been in 1863. So we are very close to the time that Braxton Bragg intends for the Confederates to begin that attack that Sunday morning. Why has this attack not happened? No, you're good. Okay, but I may need you here and there. Call me. Stay close by.
I will. Call me. I just want to be able, everybody, to go and get the ambiance as well.
Well, Braxton Bragg's orders the evening before for this attack to begin at day dawn. He doesn't put these orders out, or he doesn't have a consolidated meeting with everyone like Rosecrans has at the Widow Glen house. Rosecrans meets with all his commanders on the evening of the 19th and plans out the strategy that they're going to have for Sunday morning, September the 20th, which is to defend the Lafayette Road. Braxton Bragg wants control of that road. He wants the Confederate attack to resume at day dawn, starting with the right of the Confederate Army to strike the left of the Union Army near Lafayette Road. He wants to drive his Confederate Army and wedge it between Rosecrans and Chattanooga so that he can drive Rosecrans to the south and regain control of Chattanooga to the north, that he's had to give up about 11 days prior to this time. So, at day dawn, he is not hearing the sounds that he is expecting to hear. Leonidas Polk, who is commanding the right wing of the Confederate Army, during the night of the 19th, Bragg is going to organize his army into two wings. The right wing to give command to Leonidas Polk, and the left wing That command will be given to James Longstreet when he arrives here on the battlefield. Well, it's going to be about 11 o'clock in the evening, September 19th, that Longstreet is on the field and arrives at Bragg's headquarters. And there at his headquarters, Longstreet is given command of that left wing. Longstreet on his way here from Ringgold will almost be captured. He will ride into a Union picket line, and they are going to inquire who he was with, and Longstreet will say, well, who are you gentlemen with? And when they answer in numerical numbers instead of names, like the Confederates do, he realizes that he's inside a Union picket line. And so he'll casually say to his officers with him, oh, let's go find a better place to cross the creek a little bit further upstream. And that is how he escapes from becoming a prisoner of war. But his arrival at about 11 o'clock, Bragg informs him that he is going to command the left wing. Now, Polk has these orders too. Polk had met at Bragg's headquarters earlier in the evening. Polk's headquarters is near Alexander's Bridge. Bragg's is still down at Thetford Ford. John C. Breckinridge, who is to start this attack at day dawn, being the far right of the Confederate Army, does not receive these orders. The interesting thing is, John C. Breckinridge spends the night at Polk's headquarters there near Alexander's Bridge. Why does Polk not inform him that he is to start the attack on the morning of September the 20th? Leonidas Polk is trouble for Braxton Bragg. A person who's known as the good bishop is just a lot of bad baggage for the Army of Tennessee. He is, you could say, the ringleader of the anti-Bragg faction. The man that likes to keep things going against Braxton Bragg. Several occasions during the war, before the Battle of Perryville, also here at Chickamauga, he is going to disobey Bragg's orders. Now, if you are Leonidas Polk, and you're a bishop in the Episcopal Church, as he is, there is only one being that you actually have to answer for in the hierarchy of the Episcopal Church. And that being is, of course, God. So, Leonidas Polk feels, well, Braxton Bragg's orders, if they're not from God, I don't necessarily have to obey them if God doesn't think they're right. And so this leads to a lot of problems in the hierarchy of the Army of Tennessee. Now, history as it's come down through the years, with the end of the Civil War and having to find someone or something to blame on why the South lost the Civil War, Braxton Bragg becomes an easy scapegoat. He dies in 1876, just 11 years after the war ends. So he's not around very long to defend himself. So he becomes this easy scapegoat. Now, in recent years, new history has started to come in favor of Bragg and show that really he wasn't as bad of a commander as he's been led to believe to be all those years prior. But there's definitely a communication problem here in the Army of Tennessee. And you know from home, work, if you have communication problems, it can lead to bigger problems as well. And this just all comes to a head here with the Army of Tennessee on the morning of September the 20th. As I mentioned, Breckinridge, who's supposed to start off the attack, spends the night at Polk's headquarters. Early that morning, Breckinridge will move up here to around the area of what was Battery A, 1st Michigan Light Artillery, George Van Pelt's battery. And he and his corps commander, Daniel Hill, and also Patrick Claiborne, fellow division commander in Hill's corps, are gathered around a campfire in this area. When J. Frank Wheelis, one of Polk's staff, rides up to give Breckinridge and Claiborne orders. What has happened is Bragg, not hearing the sounds that he expected to hear, around 7 o'clock sends out Pollock Lee, one of his staff officers, to investigate. Pollock Lee is going to ride to Leonidas Polk's headquarters. And later he's going to tell Bragg that he found Polk sitting on the porch of his headquarters reading the newspaper and waiting on his breakfast. Now that's a little bit exaggerated, but when the inquiry is made of why the attack hasn't resumed, Polk really doesn't know why. He says, well, I put out orders in the evening that were drafted for General Hill, so I really don't know why it hasn't. Of course, you would think that if by a certain time you hadn't heard the noise you're supposed to hear from your troops under you, you would have gone to investigate it yourself. So he's going to write out orders that are for General Claiborne and for General Breckinridge. Rebel, if I can have your light again.
No problem. Nope. This is the double side. It takes a moment to bring it on. Okay. It'll get a little brighter.
Okay. Okay, the orders that Thomas Jack, who is Leonidas Polk's assistant adjutant general, his orders are going to be drafted, and they will say, Major General Claiborne, Major General Breckinridge, generals, Lieutenant General commanding, having sought in vain for Lieutenant General Hill, gives you directly the following orders. Move upon and attack the enemy as soon as you are in position. Major General Cheatham on our left has been ordered to make a simultaneous attack. Respectfully, generals, your obedient servant, Thomas M. Jack, Assistant Adjutant General. So, when Frank Wheelis arrives here, if you want to stay here with it. When Frank Wheelis arrives here with those orders, he's going to hand them to General Claiborne and General Breckinridge. Hill, who is here, says, well, I'm their commanding general. He goes, well, these orders are specifically for Claiborne and Breckinridge, and I am personally to hand them to them. So he hands those over to Claiborne and Breckinridge, who promptly hand them to General Hill. Now, Hill will say that twice during the night I made attempts to find Leonidas Polk's and Bragg's headquarters. And if you look on this map here that is from the maps of Chickamauga, this shows you the routes that General Hill takes during the night. The green one here, in which he rides right around Leonidas Polk's headquarters, and the blue one, in which he rides all the way around and past Bragg's headquarters, but somehow does not find either one of them during the night. Rather interesting, isn't it? So, just some more three-ring circuits, I guess you could say, going on here.
That some of the hill route that shown on the map is just conjecture.
Right.
I don't know exactly where they went.
Now,
What, you didn't go with her?
now Dave, since you are here, I think you point this out, that doesn't Hill mistake Byram's Ford for Thedford Ford?
I think he does. It seems like he does.
Okay. Okay. Which is further downstream from Thedford Ford here. Byram's Ford being further up here in this area.
He's been to to Bragg's headquarters during the day, but as I discovered driving here, things look a little different at night.
At night.
And we have better roads to follow than they did.
That's right. That's very true. So, Hill is going to give his excuses for why he cannot attack at that moment of time. This is his response to Lieutenant General Polk. General, I could find no courier at Alexander's Bridge, and therefore could not find you. My divisions are getting their rations and will not be ready to move for an hour or more. Breckinridge's wagons seem to have got lost between Thetford's Ford and this place. It will be well for you to examine the line from one end to the other before starting. Brigadier General Jackson is running from east to west. My line is from north to south. General Claiborne reports that the Yankees were felling trees all night and consequently now occupy a position too strong to be taken by assault. What shall be done when this point is reached? And so this day-dawn attack is delayed now because Hill's men are receiving their rations. And he gives in his excuse that it's been reported that the Yankees have been felling trees all night. Well, the longer you delay what Bragg wants you to do, the longer that's allowing the Union troops to do what? Okay, strengthen those breastworks that they are constructing, that they're going to be very nicely secured behind when the attack finally comes. At about what time?
9 o'clock?
About 9:30 in the morning. About 4 hours later than what Braxton Bragg has intended for this battle to resume. That's a lot of lost time for these Confederates. When Bragg wants this attack to get underway, he wants it to be conducted in echelon. Does any folks know what is meant by that? Okay, basically a stair step, starting with the far right of the line, stepping off first, and then the next, and so on down the line. The idea being to form a giant wheel to turn Rosecrans's left flank. Again, drive Rosecrans south, seize control of the Lafayette Road, form that wedge between Rosecrans and Chattanooga, and drive Rosecrans south, regain control Chattanooga to the north.
Bragg liked that echelon, didn't he?
Yes, and you cannot fault him in the fact that in a lot of battles he is trying to turn the enemy's flank. So he's not making these direct assaults like what is a lot of times thought of with Bragg. And when he made that one at Shiloh, that was from orders from Beauregard. So in other battles at Stones River, here, he is trying to turn the flank of the Union Army. Excuse me. I think yesterday's talking is starting to catch up to me. Excuse me. So, 4 hours we're going to stand idly by, the Confederates that is, until this attack is finally going to get underway, when it should be getting underway right about now with daybreak coming upon us. So Braxton Bragg eventually is finally going to come up to the Confederate line, and he's going to pretty much go down the line on the morning of the 20th with Pollock Lee doing this for him in getting the Confederates to start across the line. Now what's going to happen with that en echelon idea is the environment that we're fighting in, the woods. It's going to be very hard to keep a line like he wants to be able to have an en echelon attack. Because of the woods, because of the forest, you're not going to be able to keep a line very well. And so there's going to be places in which there are going to be what I call traffic jams, where soldiers are going to get pinched out. This is going to happen with some of Cleburne's men. And so places are going to have to be opened up to allow those guys to come in. Also, when Longstreet will eventually make the famous breakthrough advance and claim that it was his genius in stacking those brigades the way that he will to go into the Brotherton farm to hit that gap in the Union line, that was all designed by him. Well, that's all accidental, and it's due to those traffic jams that are occurring in the woods with trying to line up. So eventually Bragg is going to give up on the en echelon idea and just have Pollock Lee go down the line, and as he goes past them, each division and brigade is going to step off one by one. So you get an idea here to the problems that you're having in the Confederate Army. Here is an image I have of J. Frank Wheelis. He will say about the morning of the 20th, that on the morning of the 20th instant, between daylight and sunrise, Lieutenant General Polk sent for me to carry orders to Major Generals Cleburne and Breckinridge to make an immediate attack upon the enemy. I went directly to Colonel Thomas Jack, Assistant Adjutant General, to get the orders. As he handed them to me, he remarked that during the night, General Polk sent orders to General Hill to make the attack at daylight, that it was now after that time, and the person who carried the order had returned and reported that he had searched in every part of the field and could not find General Hill, and that the orders he, Colonel Jack, was then giving me were sent direct to the division commanders to make the attack at once. General Polk's last remark to me was not to lose time, but ride as rapidly as possible. I proceeded rapidly along the line of battle until I found General Cleburne's command, in rear of which I found Lieutenant General Hill and Major Generals Breckinridge and Cleburne around a campfire. On dismounting, I remarked that I had orders from General Polk. General Hill put forth his hand as if to receive the orders when I said, "These orders are for Generals Breckinridge and Cleburne." And then in explanation of why the orders were sent direct to the division commanders, I told General Hill that during the night, General Polk sent him orders to make the attack at daylight, but the bearer of the order could not find him, and when General Polk became aware of this, he sent these orders just delivered to the division commanders. Either General Cleburne or General Breckinridge, when he had read the order, handed it to General Hill and remarked that the men could not go into the fight until they had their rations distributed to them, to which General Hill consented. Dave, do you know when the last Hill's men had rations? About a day before this?
They had, it had been about 24 hours when they were down by Glass Mill.
Okay. Which Glass Mill is quite a bit downstream. So they've done a lot of marching during the 19th to get in the line. I think the interesting thing about Breckinridge is on the 19th, he's going to be at the far southern end of the Confederate line, facing a Union division of James Nagley's down there at Glass Mill. Maneuvers being as they are on the 19th, when Breckinridge finally makes his attack, it's going to be from the far northern end of the line. Some of the Union troops that he's going to encounter that are going to help push back his attack that morning are going to be Union troops from James Nagley's division. So I think it's interesting how opposite divisions are on one end of the battlefield one day, and here they are facing each other on the completely opposite end the next morning. So, as you can tell, the Confederate command structure is not exactly the best here. You know, as Dave points out, too, in his book, that, you know, Rosecrans has this coordinated meeting But Bragg, for whatever reason, does not have that coordinated meeting. Maybe part of this is because Longstreet's not here on the field yet, and he doesn't know when Longstreet is going to arrive. But would a coordinated meeting with all of his commanders would that have been more successful than meeting with them individually as he seemed to have? Because then you could say, well, you got the orders, everyone else was here, knowing you got these orders for the attack to start when it starts.
Bragg hasn't had much success, though, with councils of war in the past.
Yeah.
I think he's afraid of that.
And I think too that Bragg and Daniel Harvey Hill don't get along very well because they kind of have similar health problems. Both have sour stomachs, and sour stomachs lead to sour personalities, maybe. Okay, and maybe that's why they don't get along so well, as they have too much in common as far as their health problems. So, you know, it makes for interesting conjecture as to what if the Confederates had made that assault at day dawn as Braxton Bragg had intended for them to make. Would it have changed the course of this battle on September 20th, 1863?
Anton.
Yeah.
Polk's a bishop. Isn't
Correct.
the 20th Sunday?
It is.
Yeah.
Did that have anything to do? Is there any evidence that Polk was reluctant to fight on Sunday?
Not that I have seen. Dave, have you ever seen anything of that?
I don't think so. Interesting. Polk will tell his troops that it's Sunday and he's reluctant to fight on Sundays, but they have to. General Rosecrans makes the exact same comment. Rosecrans is a devout Catholic and also tells his troops that, as he's writing their lines, that it's Sunday and he doesn't like to fight on Sundays, but they'll fight if the enemy bring it to him. So, but I don't think that Polk deliberately dragged his feet because it was Sunday. Polk has many
Well, for
problems
one thing,
with it.
Shiloh's fought on Sunday, and Polk's involved in that.
Polk has many problems, but he's also an ardent secessionist and a Southerner.
There is an account of a Union soldier in the 2nd Ohio that said many of us were hoping that there would not be a fight this day, as many of us had conscientious scruples about fighting on the Sabbath. But he said the rattle of musketry about 9 a.m. Told us that the ball had opened, and we were doomed to be disappointed. Because he says, for the rattle of musketry told us that the ball had opened and the tide was before us, basically.
Anton?
Yes?
Yeah, I had a comment and a question regarding whether it would have been more successful for them to have had a council of war. It couldn't have been less successful than what they did.
Yeah.
And then the question is, when did Polk find out? Well, he sent a courier out, or a staff officer out to deliver the order to Hill, and the staff officer couldn't find Hill. So one would think the staff officer would immediately return and say, you know, Polk, I can't find Hill, so your orders are not going to be executed.
Well,
and Polk should not be sitting there reading the newspaper thinking that his orders are going to be executed.
This is what happens the night before. Thomas Jack gives those orders to a member, and I want to say his last name is Fisher, of the Orleans Light Guard. And he has said, you are to take these orders and take them to General Hill, and General Polk is not to be disturbed the rest of the night.
Okay,
So-
well, that's just crazy talk.
So what's the so if you're John Fisher, what are you supposed to do? You know, if you can't find General Hill,
So Hill's not Polk.
because
Somebody not
Thomas
Hill.
Jack has told you, who's the assistant adjutant general for Polk, that this headquarters is not to be disturbed the rest of the night.
There's one more player in that, and that's a civilian clerk in Polk's employment, who's the only one who's awake when Fisher returns. And Fisher actually asks the civilian clerk what he should do, and the clerk says, "Well, we can't wake up the general." You know, you've got the
His sleep is more important than getting the orders out.
Dr. Robertson has pointed this out on walks that we've been with him, where he talks about you have what amounts to the fate of the Confederacy in the hands of a cavalry private and a civilian clerk. And neither of them thinks even, or is willing even to wake up a sergeant, a lieutenant, a captain, the major, the general. They don't wake up anybody in authority to explain their problem.
You couldn't write this stuff.
You couldn't.
My curiosity, though, Anton,
My comment
is
he's a
why
bishop.
go and have the start of your attack on the part that you're trying to go and get to? I mean, you know, around the Union left, and draw the reinforcements there. Why not start at the other end, you know, as a demonstration more so, to go and draw the reinforcements there to weaken the other end to make it easier to get around the end? Doesn't that, I mean, am I seeing something goofy here?
No, we're kind of like those armchair quarterbacks too, saying,
Well, that's true.
you know, if they would have done that, you know,
Maybe if
know where
Longstreet had
everybody
hit the center of the line
right,
before Breckinridge goes around the line,
right.
maybe everything comes out differently.
It was more than
If
they could
there's-
do to even get the attack going where they wanted it.
Well,
So the
yeah,
idea of
but
doing a
still.
demonstration and then an attack was, you know,
Beyond-
certainly beyond their reach.
If there's one thing that I've noticed about Bragg, is once he has a battle plan in his mind, it's hard to break away from that idea. Would you agree with that, Dave?
Yes.
And maybe that has some to do with his health problems, of his headaches and things, you know, that are going on. See, that's the easy thing for us to look back and say, you know, why couldn't he adjust plans? Maybe it's not that easy. You know, if we have the health problems that Bragg has on a daily basis,
We can't communicate like
Right.
we can now.
that's right. So a lot of things to consider.
Well,
Also, when you set a plan in motion, whatever it is, especially in the 19th century, it's going to take a long time to change it.
Yeah.
And all you do is stack delay on delay. So,
Which is the last thing you want on Sunday morning when you're racking up to what is a 4-hour delay.
And it can be a real mistake to have your plan to be just to react to whatever happens, because then you lose all the initiative and, you know, you don't,
Right.
you lose all control of the conduct of the dynamic of the battle.
and to me, I think he had a good plan in the morning of the 20th.
Yes.
As it was,
Yep.
even
Bragg wasn't hearing that sound either. He wasn't getting any help from the Air Force.
I just think that even with the delays, even with the Union fortifications, Bragg still turned the Union flank and got 2 brigades into George Thomas's rear in Kelly Field and scared the living daylights out of the
What does he do? He gets George Thomas to overreact. Am I right, Dave? To where
I think
George
so.
Thomas is calling for too many troops. And I'm the biggest George Thomas fan that there probably is. But, you know, if Thomas makes a mistake, it's hard for George Thomas to make a mistake. But if he makes a mistake on the 20th, it's that he overreacts to the Confederate attack. And in his calling for more and more troops to help him up there on the left, that is what's going to lead to a breakdown in the command structure in the Union Army late in the morning on September the 20th.
It just seems to me that had that attack gone off at day dawn, it would have attacked the same Union positions, but they'd have been less fortified.
That's right.
There'd be fewer Union brigades up here, and it's possible that the entire corps would have turned the Union flank, and now you'd have 2 divisions instead of 2 brigades operating across the Lafayette Road and in George Thomas's rear in Kelly Field. And that would be a huge disaster for the Union Army.
In the end, what the Confederates will have will be what I would call piecemeal assaults. They're never going to really have a coordinated assault against that line on September the 20th. Yes, Breckinridge's troops are going to pierce it, control the Lafayette Road for about 45 minutes to an hour, but they're not going to have any help coming behind them. If they had had some help, that might have helped them to keep control of the road.
Anton, even if the delay had been 2 hours instead of 4, there wouldn't have been any Union troops north of the line all the way up to Reed's Bridge Road, right? Those troops that were there when Breckinridge stepped off were just barely there by the time he stepped off.
Well, what happens is, early in the morning, Dave, what time would you say that George Thomas and Rosecrans are up there at the McDonald farm?
The time they write their orders in the OR is 6:35 in the morning.
Okay.
So give or take 15 minutes.
Okay. Well, in their meeting, in their decisions there, it's going to be to extend Thomas's line up to the Lafayette Reed's Bridge Road.
Right.
And so Negley is going to be called north to extend Thomas's line. Well, Negley's starting north. Rosecrans sees him and says, you can't leave until you can find troops to cover your place in the line. And where Negley was early in the morning was along the western edge of the Brotherton farm. So initially only John Beatty's brigade is going to go north. And initially John Beatty is going to be placed on the left of Baird's line, you know, around modern day Battle Line Road out to Lafayette Road, that area. Well, then George Thomas says, well, I need to extend my line further north. And Beatty's like, you expect with my brigade to stretch it out this far? But Thomas's thoughts are, well, Negley's eventually going to be up here with the rest of his guys. Well, eventually Wood's division will be found and they'll come forward to take Negley's spot. And so then the Confederate attack hits, and so Negley is in motion with his other brigades, and they're going to arrive up there in time to help stem the tide of that Confederate attack. But had they been in there in the first place, all of Negley's division, again, one of those things, would the Confederates have been successful in gaining control of the Lafayette Road initially like they are?
Well, I was thinking the other way around. If the delay had been only half as long as it had been,
right,
then they'd have poured right through there even faster than they did.
Or at day dawn, there may not have been any troops between Battle Line Road and Reed's Bridge Road.
The story of Chickamauga seems to focus, rightfully, I think, on the morning of September 20th on Confederate command problems, because it's such an irresistible story in some ways. You can't believe it's happening this way. But
I mean, if people want what is a modern day soap opera in the Civil War, the Confederate command structure is a good place to start with a soap opera.
This is clearly a low point.
Because there's things going on that you just can't believe. And you know, you watch, my wife is a fan of Days of Our Lives. And I see, and I don't know how many people I've seen get away with murder on that show. You know?
But the thing that we overlook because of it is how fluid the Union battle line is between, say, 6 and 8 o'clock in the morning, or even 9 o'clock in the morning, as Rosecrans and Thomas and McCook and Crittenden start making all these adjustments. And so the line that's attacked at 9:30 is definitely not the battle line that was there at dawn.
At 5:30, yep.
What are the subordinate Confederate commanders who are not getting orders doing the Hills and the Breckinridges and that over the night and in the morning? Because you know, they knew they were in contact with the enemy. They knew there was going to be a battle the next day. I don't know if they sought out orders or if they took some steps on their own.
Well, again, like Breckinridge, you know, and this is one of those things that, again, that's a big question. Breckinridge spends the night at Polk's headquarters. Why does Polk not inform him that he is to start the day-dawn attack on September the 20th?
Well, and they don't go to bed right away either. They talk a little around the campfire.
Probably till what, about 11, midnight?
Yeah, what are they talking about? If not,
And I believe Polk's at Bragg's headquarters around 9:30.
right, yeah, about that. Yeah.
Well, does Breckinridge ask Polk, what am I supposed to do in the morning?
Well, see that we don't know. You know what their conversation was. You know,
Breckinridge says no. Breckinridge says that no one ever said a word to him about any attack at dawn.
Well, but he must have known he was supposed to do something in the morning. If you were Breckinridge, wouldn't you be curious about what am I supposed to do tomorrow?
You know,
There's going to be a hell of a battle.
You don't ask for orders.
His
You
primary focus was to get his troops fed, to get his men resupplied, and things like that.
I'm sorry?
His primary focus was to get his troops fed and get his men resupplied. Remember, there's an important thing that Anton read when Hill's saying why everything's not ready. Breckinridge's wagons seem to have gotten lost, and that's going to put a delay in resupplying, and especially
which that would be his ammunition, his medical,
right,
food supplies, all that stuff.
all the food wagons seem to be on the other side
of the creek,
of Chickamauga Creek. There's not enough space between the battle lines and the creek to park these big divisional supply trains. So they have several miles back and forth to come to bring up food.
Well, like Hill rode, all over the place looking for orders, didn't get them. Did he give any orders to his subordinate commanders that night or in the morning?
He gave orders to Claiborne about where to position his troops and to resupply them. As a matter of fact, he spent until about 10 o'clock on the night of the 19th with Claiborne. After that night attack in Winfrey Field area, he helps Claiborne position his troops. That's why he's late getting to Bragg's headquarters. Well, never finds us, but...
Just to shift the focus slightly, Longstreet arrives during the night. Why does Bragg give him command of half of his army? Longstreet doesn't know the ground, he's just arrived.
I guess his reputation has preceded him. And maybe Bragg's thinking, well, this guy's from outside, maybe I can get him to do better than what some of my own guys can do. And he's not knowing that, Longstreet's main reason for being here is not really to help the Confederate cause, but to help his cause to be an army commander. And basically says so before he leaves Richmond as to his intent of coming here. He at one point says in a letter to, I believe it's Lewis T. Wigfall of Texas, that if it would do our cause better to give me command of that army and to give Bragg command of my corps, I would be willing to do that. Okay?
Very generous of him.
Okay, but he puts in there to help our cause. Well, he should have said to help my cause.
But even though he arrived at 11 o'clock, he got Bragg's orders down to his divisional commanders.
Yes.
Isn't that correct?
Mm-hmm.
He's up before dawn, and he visits every divisional
he visits A.P. Stewart and all those fellas. Yep.
So he's out and moving and organizing his troops to be ready for this dawn attack.
So putting Longstreet in charge.
He's not reading the newspaper and waiting on his breakfast.
He does, but neither is Polk, right?
Yeah.
Well, he's not reading the newspaper and waiting on his breakfast, but he's not out doing what he's supposed to be doing either.
That newspaper story is, that really depends on who you ask.
Isn't that great?
There are a number of Polk defenders.
Oh yeah.
Who will dispute that.
Right.
It's another Polk relative, I think a cousin, or maybe I can't remember.
Is it William Mecklenburg Polk?
No, that's his son.
That's the son.
This is a Polk who commanded a battery of artillery at Shiloh and lost a leg. And forgive me, but I don't remember his name. Okay. But he's serving on Polk's staff. And in Mississippi in 1864, they will all be in Mississippi when Pollock Lee will be named as Inspector General, and he'll have to go to Mississippi and inspect Polk's corps. And so you can imagine the reaction when Pollock Lee, the man who told this tale of Polk sitting on the porch, walks into Polk's headquarters to inspect his troops. And this other Polk, Frank Polk, I think is his name, actually challenges Pollock Lee to a duel. You know, legless. You know. But Lee basically leaves, and all the Polk supporters will insist that that's a complete fabrication.
Yeah.
How can you differentiate? Bragg believes it. He repeats it to everybody. Within 2 or 3 days of the battle, Bragg has repeated in a letter to Jefferson Davis. He has told it verbally to Hill. He has written to his wife and repeated the same story. And it's almost word for word in each iteration that we have. So,
and if you look at the ORs in the 10 days or so after this battle, there's going to be a lot of statements given by different people associated with Polk. Polk's going to put out letters to W.H.T. Walker, to Hill, asking them questions. You know, what was this on the 20th? And all these different questions to defend himself, because he's being removed from command by Bragg.
He is deposing his witnesses.
That's right. But, you know, Polk's gathering a reputation by this point. This isn't the first time that he has let Braxton Bragg down. I don't know how familiar you all are with the story about Perryville, but there's a day in October, like maybe the day before the actual battle starts, that Bragg wants Polk to make a late afternoon attack against the Union position. Polk meets with his commanders under him, says, I've been given orders to make an attack. I don't know about this. What do you guys think? All right, and they say, yeah, I agree with you. We shouldn't make it. And so he decides, well, you know, my commanders have agreed with me that we shouldn't make this attack. And so it's not made.
The bishop.
The good bishop.
That's the way they operate.
That's right.
And why there was no council of war on the 19th. Bragg would have been outvoted.
Bragg lost control of councils of war at Stones River, at Tullahoma,
Yeah.
where he basically wanted to stay and fight, and then the discussion trends, and he can't seem to control a meeting, wouldn't you say? And
There is an account after Stones River where Bragg did not initially want to withdraw from Stones River, and his Army Surgeon Samuel Stout mentions that Bragg has tears at the thought of leaving those wounded men on the field there at Murfreesboro. So he does not want to withdraw, but Hardee and Polk encourage him to withdraw, and then later Hardee is going to say, well, you know, it was Bragg that decided to withdraw.
Those histories 20 years afterwards are really interesting.
Yep. But now don't think that on the morning of the 20th there are not command problems in the Army of the Cumberland. I think you point a little bit of this out, Dave, of the problems of having these mixed commands, like under George Thomas on the left. You know, Thomas has regiments from the 20th Corps, regiments from the 21st Corps under his command. So the structure is kind of weakened even in the Army of the Cumberland. Crittenden seems to have no command anymore.
By 11 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
Crittenden asks Rosecrans, since you've sent the last of my command off to General Thomas, can I go with it? And he has nothing to do at that point.
And Crittenden's headquarters is always very close to Rosecrans's during this battle.
Mm-hmm.
But how easy, you know, some have said, well, you know, Crittenden and McCook were kind of weak corps commanders. Why didn't Rosecrans replace them long before this? Well, maybe that's not an easy answer, considering that the McCook family of Ohio is pretty prominent. After all, they do have 14 McCooks fighting in the Civil War, and Crittenden is the son of Senator John Crittenden of Kentucky. So there's a lot of political influence there. So it's just not so easy to replace those guys.
When did Bragg move his headquarters from Thetford Fort to where the Cannon Pyramid is?
About late afternoon on the 20th.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the episode where General Longstreet was looking for the headquarters?
And almost got captured.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, why was he not able to find General Bragg's headquarters?
Well, Bragg does not have anyone at Ringgold waiting to meet Longstreet. Longstreet basically is coming to this battlefield by the sound of the battle on the late afternoon and into the evening hours of the 20th. So he's coming here by sound. And I think it's up by, isn't it Dyer Bridge where the episode happens that he's about captured?
I think that he goes up there first. Dr. Robertson thinks he goes further south.
Okay.
And there's some argument to be made for that, because Longstreet, well, really his staff officer Sorrell talks about riding, and as they're riding towards looking for the headquarters, they keep finding these columns of wounded men, wagons and ambulances bringing wounded men from the battlefield, and they're all to the right, which would mean he would be headed more towards Lee and Gordon's Mills. The only problem with that, I think, is that he has to get to the Union picket line late at night. He would then have to go through virtually the entire Confederate Army. But that is a difficult point to resolve. I personally think it happens. He first goes up there and then comes south looking for the headquarters, but it takes him most of.
Did he not already have staff officers on the field, though?
He did.
Why would, I guess, and this is the point that came up yesterday.
Yeah, because Hood's division is already on the field.
Knowing that your commander is coming to this field and is not going to have a clue.
Well, in the modern military,
staff officers not meet you at the depot.
Yeah, well, in the modern military, the reason you send an advance party is specifically for those kinds of reasons. The other thing that's interesting is that all he had, Ringgold wasn't deserted. It's not like there were no troops in Ringgold. There's a Confederate, there are Confederate troops in Ringgold, provost troops and things, who he can ride into town and request a guide. They don't seem to do that either.
At Ringgold, that is, I was at the Ringgold Gap a couple of days ago, and they opened the depot. That is where they arrived.
Not at the depot.
Not at the depot.
The train tracks stopped. You have to go a couple miles outside of town to about where the old stone church is.
Oh, okay. And then they marched here?
Yes.
That's right.
It's long.
But they're infantry. They're supposed to march.
But you point out something that I had not thought of, and that is Longstreet could have gone to Ringgold and requested someone to bring him here.
There's a provost guard in Ringgold.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a better part of
there is activity in Ringgold.
No, he didn't. He already thinking of himself as
we
the
don't know
Army
that he
commander.
didn't. What we do know is that neither he nor Sorrell, who are describing this expedition, and admittedly they're describing it much later, neither of them say they did.
Well, if that's that obvious, why would they not just forget? Because you assume that.
Well, now we're really reaching a point where, what are their motives for what they're writing? What's possibly, Sorrell is trying to magnify Longstreet's reputation and diminish Bragg's. What we don't have is a very good contemporary account within a couple of days of what Longstreet did. One of the from a historian's point of view, one of the absolute best things that can happen from this whole Confederate command confusion is that a couple days after this battle, Bragg arrests Polk. And so immediately everybody starts lining up their witnesses and getting these statements, Wheelis' statement, and they're all made within just a few days of the battle. Before.
I mean, there's several statements from people with this Orleans Light Guard.
Yes.
I mean, more than Fisher. There's at least, I'd say there's at least 3 people from that Orleans Light Guard that make statements.
And so we have a lot of contemporary evidence about what happens with Polk, what he's doing on the battlefield, what Bragg's doing. We don't have any of that with Longstreet. Bragg didn't arrest Longstreet. So the accounts that we have are 10 and 20 years after the fact, or in Longstreet's case, in his memoirs, until 1904. And his memoirs are, of course, the earliest interview I know of is a Cincinnati Enquirer interview from the mid-1880s.
Mm-hmm.
What was Polk arrested for?
Insubordination.
Polk was arrested for disobedience of orders, not only September 20th, but in the prelude to what happens here, around the area of Rock Spring.
Was that the end of his career?
No. Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, Polk's going to go on because Polk has, this is one of those other things about in the years after the Civil War, that you've always heard people say, well, Bragg and Davis were close friends. Bragg and Davis are not close friends. Now, who are close friends are Polk and Davis. Now, they're classmates from West Point. How else does a man with no military combat experience become a major general at the beginning of the Civil War? Which he's way above what he should have been.
Raised a lot of troops is the other way.
And it takes 3 years. It takes 3 years. But finally, at Pine Mountain in June of 1864, Sherman is going to direct some artillery fire up on Pine Mountain. Polk is not going to listen to what some say and say, you need to get away from the edge. There's an artillery battery down there. He decides to take a closer look. And he's going to get struck square in the chest.
Gets to meet his God.
Now again, what if though at Perryville, there is an episode in the Battle of Perryville where Polk actually rides into a Union line, but he's able to get away before they recognize it.
That's like Zellicopper, right? He rides up to the line.
Yep.
And
yep.
He was Lincoln's best general.
Can you discuss the dynamics of the decision to send Longstreet from the east to the west here and all that? And how long
the idea is,
what was the situation at the time?
This is the situation. In the east after Gettysburg, the Army of the Potomac and the Army of Northern Virginia basically have said, okay, we're shutting down for the year. And so the decision is made. Chattanooga is very important because of its rail centers and its gateway to the Deep South. We have to hold Chattanooga. Let's send troops from the east to reinforce Bragg's army to keep control or regain control, as they're attempting to do at this battle, of that important city. Now, keep in mind, this is a city of 2,500 people in 1863, so it's very small. But that gives you an idea to its importance in the big picture for the Confederacy, that they're willing to send troops from other areas here. And then eventually that's going to happen with the Union armies after this battle. When Rosecrans withdraws to Chattanooga, the Lincoln administration is going to realize, okay, they need some help. And knowing how important Chattanooga is, let's send them reinforcements. And so they're going to get help from the Army of the Potomac and from the Army of the Tennessee.
And how many troops does Longstreet arrive with?
I would say approximately 10,000. Wouldn't you say that's a fairly good number, Dave? Mm-hmm. Now, not all of his troops are here. Lafayette McLaws has not arrived here. Edward Porter Alexander with his artillery is not here yet. And one problem for the artillery is they didn't bring their horses with them. So that's creating some more logistical problems for the Confederates.
Well, Longstreet arrives without any wagons, no transportation of any kind, just the infantry.
Yep.
Which Bragg's, that goes right to the problem of what do you do after you won the battle? Well, you've got to feed and supply all these troops, and all of a sudden you're trying to feed an army that's doubled in size, but the logistical transportation hasn't. It's a complex problem.
But did Bragg make that request, or was that made at a higher level?
The decision to send troops here, that's done at a higher level. That's done by Richmond, by Davis and the Confederate administration.
Did Johnston ever send any troops here?
Well, troops from Joseph E. Johnston's army in Mississippi do come here. W.H.T. Walker's are part of those troops. Eventually, you'll get some more help from Vicksburg area. It'll be Carter Stevenson's division for the fall of 1863 that'll arrive here.
But as Johnson points out, they are a loan to be promptly returned.
Yeah.
Actually, originally Johnson didn't want to send troops here. He just wanted them to go as far as Atlanta to defend Atlanta in case Bragg got into trouble.
Any other questions?
So when Longstreet arrived, he did not have any horses at all? Did he not have his own personal horses? Or
He had some personal horses, but
he had a personal mount. Sorrel had a horse.
So they didn't have to hunt for...
They didn't have to hunt up their animal. They did have to wait a couple of hours. They weren't on the same train.
Okay.
The horses came on a second train.
I had thought if they had to hunt for transportation, they would have talked to locals, and they might have.
Right.
That would have been an incentive to get a guy.
That might have helped.
Didn't Longstreet believe he belonged, deserved command of whatever army he was in?
well, again, part of his this is part of his reason for coming west. He's miffed with what happens at Gettysburg. Okay, he's already in the game of blaming Lee for what happens there. Of course, Longstreet's never going to point the finger at himself and say, well, maybe what I did here or what I did there maybe was a fault of mine. Longstreet's never going to do that. The blame is always going to be on someone else.
And which seems to be a general failing of generals.
It's in the job description.
It rolls downhill.
That's the first thing they learn at West Point. Blame someone else when you can do it.
Doesn't matter if we solve the problem.
That's right.
As we find someone to blame.
Anton, I read the book Longstreet, and it sounds like Longstreet tried to get out of Virginia a lot sooner than they let him get out. And that he would have, if they sent him originally, he would have gotten a chance to go through Knoxville instead of all the way down through the Carolinas, and gotten here a lot sooner and maybe changed the picture completely. And
I mean, it's not long after Gettysburg that he starts pushing this idea, but it's finally around the early days of September that the Confederate government is finally going to say, okay, we're going to send your corps west. So yeah, he's pushing it from July.
If they'd sent him then he could have gone through Knoxville, and that whole picture could have changed.
But at that point, though, they're still not comfortable with what the Army of the Potomac is maybe going to do in the east. You know, is there going to be a reaction from it? You know, and they're going to figure out about late August that, okay, it appears that things here are going to be quiet the rest of the year. Let's go ahead and send them.
To basically make sure that they didn't take troops from these.
Yesterday when we broke up into groups, all of us didn't pass through this area, and I was wondering if it would be possible to go off topic and just discuss this monument behind you. I've heard a lot about this Loomis's battery.
Yeah, this is a monument to Battery A of the